to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. Clarissa Shields is back at it, once again, welcoming a fight with Keith Thurman and insisted she would beat him. Thurman is not that great of a boxer. Is he strong? Yes, but what else? Tim Tszyu's gonna knock Thurman's ass out. I'm a woman, but I'm bigger than Thurman. I'm longer, I've got better skills. How's he gonna take punches I give him? Thurman can't take a body shot. You're talking to a boxing encyclopedia.
How's Thurman gonna take punches you give him? There are girls that take the punches that you give them.
Ivana Habazin took your punches. Hannah Gabriels took your punches. Both went the distance with you where they were stopped by other women, smaller women.
Smaller than you.
Hannah Gabriels was stopped by Oxandia Castillo. Both fought you, and you didn't stop them.
So why do you think you're gonna stop Keith Thurman?
Why do you keep thinking you can stop a man when you can't stop women? When's the last time you scored a knockout? And let's make it clear that we're not talking about just any man, we're talking about a pugilist, a boxer, like she's a boxer. You can't stop women boxers. What makes you think you can stop a man?
How does she think she sounds when she says this stuff?
Is she lacking that much situational awareness? How does she think she sounds? How does she think this comes across?
Sounds stupid.
Didn't she get sat on her ass by some nobody? Some guy with a record of 7-1? Some guy that Rolly Romero stopped? Sparring session that was leaked a few months ago. The sparring session that made headlines where Clarissa Shields was knocked on her ass by some nondescript Eastern European boxer.
It's a problem.
Part of it is that she's a bully. A part of it is that Keith Thurman makes himself an easy target. He's low-hanging fruit to a lot of people.
He is.
He seems like low-hanging fruit to a lot of male boxers. He seems like low-hanging fruit to a lot of men. Her problem is she's a woman.
There are a lot of men that don't spend this much time worrying about Keith Thurman and talking about fighting Keith Thurman, calling out Keith Thurman. There are a lot of male boxers that don't bother with that. She does.
Why?
Because she thinks she looks big and bad when she does it. She tells herself, look at me, picking on this guy, picking on this man, this male boxer, this former world champion.
Things being the way that they are in this day and age, with so many individuals working to blur the line that distinguishes men from women and the differences that would normally be honored,
They should give her what she wants.
they should let her fight Keith Thurman. And Keith Thurman should fight her with no stipulations, no requisites, no handicaps. You're big and bad.
You're tough.
Because you shoot off at the mouth and nobody checks you for it. If Keith Thurman did, he'd be wrong, wouldn't he?
This woman is one of the most unlikable people in the sport of boxing. Simultaneously, one of the most accomplished, but also one of the most unlikable.
She is unlikable. In her own mind, does she think that because she won 2 gold medals or because she won a couple of vacant titles in a couple of barren weight classes,
Empty.
does she think that compensates for her character flaws and her lack of class? I never saw Katie Taylor, Sinicia Estrada, Alicia Baumgartner. I never saw Cecilia Brækhus,
Savannah Marshall.
Jo Castavalle, Tina Ruprecht. I never saw Marlena Esparza, Terry Harper, Natasha Jonas, Hannah Gabriels. I never saw any prominent woman boxer carry on the way that Clarissa carries on, going out of her way to diminish a man publicly.
I never saw that.
I never saw any of them doing what Clarissa is doing. I never saw that.
Is it that she has such an inflated sense of self that she thinks her career accomplishments are any compensation for the insufferable bore that she is?
Hey, you won 2 gold medals. Congratulations.
Still sound fucking stupid.
Ah, you won a bunch of belts from 168 to 160.
Still sound fucking stupid.
And 154.
Still sound fucking stupid.
Sound like a fucking idiot. Sounds like a moron, a bozo, a clown that will do anything and say anything to get attention, no matter how ridiculous it is, no matter how ridiculous it sounds. Chris Cyborg is interested in fighting you. She's interested in fighting you at 147. I vaguely recall Clarissa saying that she would come down to 147 for Katie Taylor, who's a lightweight.
Do you remember that?
2 or 3 years ago, I remember she said she would come down to 147 for a fighter that campaigns at 135, but she won't come down to 147 for a fighter who fights at 147.
Why not?
She's not otherwise preoccupied with anything. The barren divisions she campaigns in, there's no one left for her to fight. Why do you think she became undisputed so fast? How do you think that happened as many times as it happened? Because there's nobody up there.
Most of those belts were vacant, and at those weights, there were probably 2 to 3 girls who can really fight. 2 to 3 talented girls The max.
It's not that many. So you've got time to sit around making stupid sound bites about the woulda, coulda, shoulda if you fought Keith Thurman. The worst thing that could happen to you is they let you fight Keith Thurman. With no restrictions, no handicaps, they just let you loose and let you go.
Fight.
Truth is, you're only saying this stuff because you don't actually expect anything to happen. You don't expect him to entertain you. Thus, you're publicly humiliating him deliberately. If you're serious about fighting a man and serious about showing how big and bad you are, call out the Charlo brothers. They campaign it the same way you do. They're just men. They ain't got no compunction about putting their hands on a broad.
Those the guys that beat up their girlfriends?
Didn't Jamal knock over some waitress at a diner, and didn't Jamal put his hands on his girlfriend and bragged about it?
Call those guys out. They might actually take you up on your offer.
And super featherweight yesterday, we saw reigning WBC super featherweight champion O'Shaquie Foster successfully defend his title against the challenger Abraham Nova, a guy who's a bit taller, a bit longer, with speed of his own. And at the start, it was very tense between them because, as stated, Nova's got some size, so it was a little awkward for O'Shaquie Foster at first.
They were fencing a lot.
But as the fight progressed and things started to heat up between them, you saw the limitations of Abraham Nova, that outside of a good double jab, outside of the straight punches, he didn't have much else to offer, getting caught in the exchange. When they were trading, O'Shaquie Foster's punches were shorter, tighter, and harder than Abraham Nova's, whereas Abraham resorted to holding and smothering and collapsing the pocket.
He's big for the weight, and he's a very athletic guy with some speed, though in terms of fundamentals, that's what he's missing. That's what he's lacking.
That's how he beat him. Everything you got from O'Shaquie Foster was tighter, more controlled. Even in moments when Nova is trying to make a mess of things and holding, you still saw O'Shaquie Foster working with the free hand, putting punches in there in the clinch, working in the clinch.
Scored a late knockdown as Abraham Nova was barreling forward, trying to get punches in, lands a short left hook that drops him by the ropes.
Was just a more solid, put-together effort from the champion as opposed to the challenger, as opposed to Abraham Nova. And where he goes from here, I'm not sure, but we have a better idea of what O'Shaquie Foster means to do moving forward now that he successfully defended the WBC title. He's looking to unify. Immediately afterwards, he was mincing words with this division's WBA champion, newly crowned
Lamont Roach,
who became WBA champion in his last fight opposite the ring, then champion Hector Garcia, who was coming off that loss to Gervonta Davis, that knockout loss at 135. He returned to 130 where he was still a champion, but then he lost the belt. He lost it to Lamont Roach, who late yesterday was mincing words with O'Shaquie after O'Shaquie's fight. He responded to a Twitter user that goes by the name Rich Cash Talk, who instructed him to go get the WBC title next, to which Lamont responded, "That's my shit too."
just watch.
To which O'Shaquie Foster responded, "Boy, stop talking crazy. I promise. I'm gonna punish you." Lamont responded by saying, "You almost lost to a guy who got clipped at 126. What the fuck do you think I'm gonna do to you?"
Almost lost.
What fight was he watching? Because I think that O'Shaquie beat Abraham Nova handily. He had to work for it, but it was never a fight I thought got away from him.
This guy's just looking for something to say.
In any event, O'Shaquie responded by saying, "We're gonna see, bitch ass. You've been trying to be friendly with me since the amateurs. Now you're tough. I'm gonna show you."
Unifications are in order. The world titles at this weight are split 4 ways between 4 different fighters, 4 different champions.
O'Shaquie and Lamont are just 2. Emmanuel Navarrete, reigning WBO champion.
Joe Cordina of the UK, IBF champion. Those are 2 more.
Let's get the lay of the land here. Even though O'Shaquie Foster and Lamont Roach were mincing words yesterday, it just so happens that Lamont Roach is currently under orders to satisfy his mandatory challenger, Ireland's own John O'Carroll.
If they want to do a unification match, they're going to have to get that guy to stand down and step aside because the order already came down.
I'm not completely sure who Lamont Roach is with at this time, and I'm not sure who John O'Carroll is with at this time. So if you order a fight between them, who's going to pay for it?
Didn't you say that Lamont Roach's last fight was on a PBC?
Yeah, it was, but he wasn't the PBC fighter. Hector Garcia was the PBC fighter. He was the WBA champion, and Lamont won the fight. Looks like he took the belt and ran. Clarification is needed when it comes to the WBA. When it comes to the WBO, that division's WBO champion is currently making his way north of 130 up to 135 to take on Dennis Berenchik for the newly vacated WBO title up there.
I don't think he's coming back.
Why don't you think he's coming back?
Because if Emmanuel Navarrete wins that fight at 135 and becomes WBO champion up there, the WBO has a rule
They don't allow any of their champions to hold world titles at more than one weight at the same time. They're going to force him to choose. And I don't think he's making his way up to 135 because he's so focused on 130. I think he's making his way up to 135 because the money up there is better and the fights are bigger. If he becomes WBO champion, he can fight the winner of Lomachenko versus Kambosos in a unification match, which would be bigger than any fight he could have at 130. So I don't think he's coming back down. If he wins, I think he's staying up there, at which point the WBO title will go vacant. The winner of the upcoming Liam Wilson versus Oscar Valdez fight may be elevated to full WBO champion. That's set to go down next month towards the end of it.
That's what's going on with the WBO.
Via the IBF, reigning IBF champion Joe Cordina is set to be returning to action in May on the undercard of Fury versus Usyk that has been rescheduled. And beyond that, he already has a mandatory challenger in the queue. Mandatory challenger Eduardo Sugar Nunez.
Became the mandatory challenger yesterday when he took on former IBF champion Shavkat Rakhimov and stopped him in 11 rounds off a salvo of punches, a barrage of punches. It's questionable as to whether or not Joe Cordina is going to stay at this weight or is he going to move up. If he successfully defends the IBF title in May,
the only way he gets around Sugar Nunez is with a unification match, but he's on the matchroom side of things. The other belts,
two of them are at top rank.
Lamont Roach has the other, but as stated, Lamont Roach has his own mandatory to satisfy. So things really are shaking, rattling, and rolling at 130 pounds.
My thoughts.
Because O'Shaquie Foster is a top-ranked fighter on a top-ranked side of things, and because both Joe Cordina and Lamont Roach might be otherwise preoccupied, I get the sense that the closest belt to him that he can unify will be the WBO title after Navarrete vacates it and after a champion is crowned in the Liam Wilson versus Oscar Valdez fight.
Whoever wins that fight is likely to become WBO champion because, like I said, I don't think Emmanuel's coming back down.
So it could come down to O'Shaquie Foster versus either Liam Wilson or Oscar Valdez. In spite of him going back and forth with Lamont Roach yesterday, I'm not sure that Lamont is free to unify.
And that's the lay of the land at 130 pounds.
Upstairs in men's super lightweight news, some interesting comments from the Bob father, Bob Arum, who names the world champion who lost his way by listening to the wrong people. He's talking about Teofimo Lopez.
Most of the problems that fighters have with their promoters can all be traced back to listening to the wrong people, getting bad advice.
Bob Arum believes Teofimo Lopez was listening to the wrong people as he suffered some difficulties in his career. Lopez suffered a defeat to George Kambosos Jr. in November of 2021, losing 4 belts at lightweight to his Australian champion.
We've talked about that a million times.
Which led to a decision to move up to super lightweight, and 2 fights to get used to his new surroundings didn't offer much reason for optimism, but he produced an outstanding showing to take Josh Taylor's WBO title away from him last summer.
Just to look like shit with Jermaine Ortiz 2 Thursdays ago.
Teofimo Lopez fans, Teofimo Lopez fanatics often characterize his lackluster showings as quote-unquote fighting to the level of his competition, which isn't necessarily untrue, but it's an oversight. An oversight that doesn't characterize why do you look bad with a George?
Why?
Why do you look bad with a Jermaine Ortiz, a Sandor Martin, then turn around and look good with a Josh Taylor?
How does that happen? Those guys weren't undisputed champions. He was. They don't rank as high as he does.
If he keeps his head on straight and acts like he's acting now, he can be a major star because he's a fun guy. And I think he's begun to understand that boxing is not only a sport, but it's also the entertainment business. He's a character. You always laugh when he's on.
Discussing his previous difficulties, Arum suggested
He was listening to the wrong people.
as stated, all the rifts you see between fighters and their promoters can be traced back to listening to the wrong people, like how Ryan Garcia was listening to Floyd and listens to his lawyer, Lupe Valencia.
Causes problems with Golden Boy.
Teofimo Lopez listening to his people, his guy David McWater.
Causes problems with Top Rank.
The manager is intended to act as a buffer. between the fighter and the promoter. Someone to fight for the fighter, someone to argue on the fighter's behalf. But that doesn't always mean they're right.
Not always.
Sometimes the guy's just greedy. Sometimes the guy's overestimating the fighter's value, gives advice on that predication, and things go awry. Things go wrong.
We can't spend 24/7 with any one fighter because we have so many fighters and we're doing so many programs. So sometimes when we're not around, he has people buzzing in his ear about this and that, and they become discontented. But I think his eyes are open now, and I look for a great and fun career from him.
Not completely sure what's next for Teofimo Lopez because the other champions at this weight are otherwise preoccupied or on other sides of the street. We know that Subriel Matias recently crossed over from PBC over to Matchroom, and he's going to be fighting there now. We know that Rolly Romero, WBA champion, is likely to lose his WBA title to Isaac Cruz. They're both over there on the PBC, and Devin Haney.
He's fighting Ryan Garcia.
Teofimo's been carrying on about petitioning the WBO for super champion status so he can become Terence Crawford's mandatory challenger, but we'll see if he actually does that. We'll see if he means business, and we'll see if Top Rank supports him in that endeavor, because if anybody's going to pay for that fight, it would be them.
Somebody has to.
Boxing fans are a lot dumber than other sports fans, and they have very little understanding of the sports infrastructure and what needs to happen for a fight to take place. And for that fight to take place, Top Rank has to want to do it. They have to want to pay for it, because if they don't, then it doesn't happen.
Teofimo's contracted to them. He's their fighter.
If they support this, they can't just say so in interviews. They have to actually pay for it. Put the money up to get Terence in the ring with Teofimo. They have to do it, and if they don't, then it don't happen.
It won't happen.
What might is if Devin Haney takes care of business in the Ryan Garcia fight like everybody's expecting him to, I expect Devin to go back over to the Top Rank side of things for a unification match with Teofimo, because that unification is a bigger fight, a bigger money fight than a Matias fight.
Subriel Matias, IBF champion, might be on DAZN now, closer to Devin, but that's still not a bigger money fight than Haney versus Lopez.
The Lopez fight has more of a profile. I feel like if Devin beats Ryan, he'll see about doing that, and then if that doesn't work, maybe he goes back to a Matias fight. If it does work and he wins,
he gets Lopez's belt, then he'll circle back for Matias's belt. Considerable time will have passed, though.
The Ryan Garcia fight is next. A Lopez fight would presumably take place later on this year, towards the end of it, in theory.
Pushing a Matias fight out the next year.